Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm joined by my longtime podcast partner, Bob Duff. And this is the HockeyDebates.com podcast. We come to you twice a week to talk all things hockey, and we have a very special guest today. Of course, it's longtime and highly respected Nashville Predators broadcaster, Pete Weber. Pete, thanks for joining the show. And I think we can say that the show that we're all waiting for is about to happen finally after wondering for a long time. It looks like we're on go to get this season restarted.
It looks that way. I certainly hope so, as I'm sure you guys do as well. This is something that back on March 12th, we had no idea we'd be coming up here in the first week of July and still wondering what is going to actually happen.
Pete, I want to ask you about the series, but I guess I want to ask about what your personal plans are, or do you even know? Will you be broadcasting, or how will it work? And just tell us what you know thus far.
I will be doing radio from remote, off a monitor. Who knows? Maybe even in this office here at home. That's still to be determined. And if so, my cat will be very happy. But if someone were to tune into our broadcast, usually after I finish a sentence, you'll hear a meow. So that might be almost like the old Mary Tyler Moore show.
That's great. Great. I love that. Well, I'm glad the team is being responsible and making sure you're safe. We all want that. But anyway, you're going to have a great series to call because, boy, it sure seems like this is evenly matched. Both strong defensive teams, both teams, probably struggled too much to score a goal.
Yeah, they have done that. The Predators have done that throughout the course of this year. There have been a few games where they've had outbursts, but not that many. And actually, the one that occurs to me first was that second period they had in Detroit back early in the year. Then they were off 3 days and played in Denver and had the reverse done to them by the Avalanche. Those are about the only big goal outbursts that I can truly recall. And as far as playing Arizona, they've not met since a couple of days before Christmas. So we'll have to see how many changes they have and how many changes the Predators have. But basically, we're going to have people that have a lot of healthy people back in the lineup, at least at the start.
Well, we're in so much unknown here as far as these playoffs are going to go. We've never experienced something like this before, but they always talk about experience being such a huge advantage in the playoffs, and certainly Nashville has a lot more experience at playoff hockey in recent years than Arizona. Do you think that's still a factor, or are we just so out of the norm here that nobody really knows what's going to happen?
I think it's the latter there. I think it's the out of the norm there, Bob, that you really think, what can you possibly compare this to? There's nothing, absolutely nothing, at least in sports that I've ever experienced, where you've had this long a break and where we truly can say this postseason is a separate season from what we experienced prior to all of that. I mean, I never thought when we were in the hotel lobby in Toronto on the 12th of March that we would be doing anything other than games with nobody in the stands, like we were preparing for Columbus that weekend. And then to come up to what this is right now, the 12-team format in both conferences, I think is going to be very, very intriguing. I hope we can get all the way through it. And if there's a blip here or there, still award the Stanley Cup at some portion before Halloween.
Pete, does it worry you a little bit that we've had a number of positive tests of players, not just in our sport, but in all sports?
It worries me, Kevin, yes. And I'm just thinking about the MLS tournament where they had a whole team withdraw already, Dallas FC, because they had double-digit cases on that team alone. And we're getting reports around the league now. The percentages are not that high in hockey, at least that I've heard so far, as they are maybe in some of the other sports. But then it seems the biggest story in the other sports right now are the players who are opting out. And I haven't heard that many opt-outs in hockey to this point.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting story. What's that say about our sport that, there's so many different ways to look at that.
Maybe we're stubborn. Maybe we want to play. Maybe we love to play. And I'm going to look more on that for the explanation for it. This is going to be one thing where we don't have to go to analytics. I think we can just look at the guys' personalities who play and compete in this game.
Yeah, I think hockey is. Kevin and I have debated this thing. It's the ultimate team sport where every guy on that bench, every guy in that dressing room has a role to play and has to fill that role if the team's going to win. And I think they're all pulling the rope in the same direction, and nobody wants to be that guy that kind of lets the side down. So I think that's a big part of why you haven't heard a lot of dissent, if any, from hockey.
Yeah. And I think that is one of the glorious parts of this game right now. I really do.
Pete, when I look at this series, since I like, both teams' defensive styles, and Darcy Kemper has done a terrific job for Arizona, and you got to hope. I'm assuming that Pekka Rinne will find his former star quality play, so that there'll be kind of an even defensively and in goal, and then it'll just come down to scoring goals. And probably it'll come down to, for Arizona, is whether or not Taylor Hall can have a big series. And for Nashville, guys like Ryan Johansson and Matt Duchene, both of whom, are coming off pretty weak offensive seasons.
I think we might have lost Pete. I think, Kevin, when you talk about these two teams, we lost him. Hopefully he'll be back. People always talk about an X factor in a playoff series, and when you hear people talk about Arizona, the X factor they seem to point to is Phil Kessel, who is a guy that maybe didn't have the season they were expecting him to have when he arrived in Arizona this year, but has a history certainly with the Penguins of coming up big in the playoffs. And is he a guy? I mean, they always joke about Phil Kessel's conditioning. Well, nobody's ain't going to be in A-level condition going into this, you'd have to figure. So maybe this level's the playing field for Phil.
Well, it's kind of interesting you should say that. Like, normally I would agree with you, and I hate to say this because I always hate it when these players say this, but we hear fourth liners say, if I score, it's a bonus. And I hate to say this, but that's sort of how I feel about Phil Kessel right now. Like, I'm more inclined to think that they got to get scoring, they being the Coyotes, from Taylor Hall or Clayton Keller to rise up, or more offense out of their defensive, their defensemen. So I don't know. I don't want to completely write off Phil Kessel because he's still Phil Kessel, but I'm just not counting on him like I have in the past. Even though, and you are saying correctly, he has risen up in the postseason. We've seen that, and when he does that, he takes over a game. But I don't know. Does he still have it left in him to do that? I'm skeptical.
Well, that's when Phil always seems to be at his best, though, when people aren't not counting on him. I mean, Toronto counted on him to carry them, and that just wasn't a spot Phil felt comfortable. I think that's more speaks to his personality than his ability. He's just not a guy who wants to have the limelight shining on him. But he was in the perfect situation in Pittsburgh because he didn't have to be that guy. And I think in Arizona, there's probably more of a spotlight on him because he was kind of brought in as that hired gun to give them offense, and it hasn't happened.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that trade was so exciting from the Coyotes' perspective because, I think if you're a Coyotes fan, you've just been so disappointed. Like, like we still know there's Pete.
Yeah, we have Pete back.
Yeah. Pete, we were just kind of talking about, who is going to have to carry the load for each team offensively. And I brought up Taylor Hall, and then from the Coyotes, Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson, who are coming off 4 seasons. Bob said, maybe the X factor could be Phil Kessel, who has a history of rising up. Your thoughts on, who's got to play well offensively for either of these teams to win this series?
Well, I think for the Coyotes, it likely would be Phil Kessel. Absolutely. He's a guy who does rise to the occasion, to be certain. For the Predators, does Roman Josi keep?
We lost him again, I think. We lost him.
able to bring his game up to a level like he had before.
Yeah.
I mean, it's difficult to tell. And I have to apologize for all my transmission difficulties this afternoon, gentlemen. For that, I'm very, very apologetic.
That's all right. Things happen. I've told Kevin this now since we've entered this kind of COVID broadcasting world. When you see even the major networks are resorting to this kind of technology, and they're having the same kind of problem. So
Yeah.
It's not so much us as it is the world we're forced to live in, I think.
Speaking
Well,
of,
at least we're not playing instruments.
yeah, that's right. But Pete, speaking of Roman Yossi, is this his year to win the Norris Trophy? But there's a drumbeat out there. Like, I don't know that he's the favorite, but he sure has a lot of support.
Right. And he should have, the way he has played and the way he has helped the club on both ends of the ice. I think he's probably the guy that if we're going to start a new award, the 200-foot game award, maybe he should be the guy. Maybe it should be a statue of this kid from Bern, Switzerland, going up and down the ice and playing both ends as well as he has throughout the course of this year. He has, I think, an even stronger case than Shea Weber did about 5-6 years ago, when we all thought he was going to have a good shot at it.
It kind of reminds me a bit of Nick Lidstrom in the fact that he seems to fly under the radar. It took the NHL a long time to kind of recognize how good Nick Lidstrom was, and it seems like it's been the same case with Roman Yossi.
Yeah, and I thought a lot of those comparisons going through Gunnar Nordstrom's book on Nick, The Perfect Human Being, if you will, that came out several weeks ago. I saw so many rational comparisons between the two of them.
Pete, give us your analysis of what's going on with Pekka Rinne this season. Obviously, he hasn't been the Pekka that we're used to.
But I think that he was going down into the pause. I think really after John Hines took over and changed the club from a man-to-man to a zone defensive system in the Predators' end, I think that's made all the difference in the world in the terms of grade A chances. We sound like butchers, aren't we? We're talking about grade A chances. All the grade A chances he has had to face, especially in the first part of this year. I just think that it was tragic what he had to face during the course of the first 40 games or so of the season. And then John Hines comes in and makes that defensive zone change. And I think it has made all the difference in the world. And certainly it didn't hurt UC Saros either.
Well, Pete, there's been a lot of talk about what players are doing to stay in game condition as they waited out these 2-3 months of activity. What have you done to stay in game condition? Now, we've seen some pretty famous videos. I know there's a British play-by-play announcer who keeps doing play-by-play of the life of his dogs. I mean, have you done anything like that to keep yourself sharp?
Yeah. I was hoping I could do it with my cat, but he is so darn lethargic. There's not much action to call there. So I'm watching old videos and sort of old games and doing games, sort of talking to myself. I probably will need counseling before this part of it is all over. And then next week, I'm probably going to pop in NHL 2K and start calling things off that very realistic video that we now have. A little bit better than the Pong games we had, should I say back when I was a kid or back when I was a post kid?
Yeah. One final question. Have we heard whether or not, David Poyle, who you and I know quite well, and he's probably made up his mind already, but obviously he's in the higher risk age category. Will he be in the bubble with his team, or will he be watching from home? Have you heard?
I'm sorry, I can't hear anything right now. And why that is, I don't know.
All right. Well, we're going to let you go. So thanks so much for joining us. All right. Well, for as little time as we had pretty good information there, Bob. But I don't think Pete thinks any differently than we do. It sounds like it's going to be a very tight series with Nashville and Arizona. compete. And, the 5-game series, you and I have talked about this before, boy, that just makes it even more dramatic. You lose the first 2 and you're so far behind the 8 ball. Like, that's like being down 3-0.
And you're coming off, not having played for 3 months. So, whoever gets their game back the earliest is going to have such a massive advantage in those best of 5 series because, as you say, even losing game 1 now, game 2 is a must win. You can't lose game 2 and then try to win 3 in a row.
Well, that's for sure. And I think, you hear it all the time. Like, that first game, well, we just needed to get, back in the rhythm a little bit, and we were a little bit off. They were a little bit better than us, but, we'll get our rhythm back. Well, there's no time for that now. There's no time to find your rhythm. You better, hit the ice, ready to go. And I think that's why you'll see, nothing but scrimmaging in these practices for the most part, because the timing's got to get down, the line chemistry has to be right, and more importantly, and this is a point that I think you've hit on pretty hard, being a former goalie yourself, and that is the goalies have got to get shots. Like they got to face some rubber and be ready to for game action. And how many goalies have we already heard say, I haven't taken a shot since March? Like, whew, that's a long time.
Yeah, there's really no way to replicate that except in the rink. You can't stand in your driveway and have people shoot pucks at you because it's not the same. It's not. And I think we've been around a million morning skates and practices where you see the backup goalie just stays out there and takes shot after shot after shot. And the backup goalie's role is you don't leave the ice till the last guy's done because your job is to be there so they can work on stuff. Well, I think we're going to see both goalies doing that in these brief camps they're going to have before they start playing. I'm sure you're going to see goalies staying out long after they're done practicing to keep getting rubber and seeing more rubber and just trying to get back into that groove.
It's going to be reminiscent of when Dominic Hasek was playing and would basically grab guys and say, you can't go in, I need more shots. He would make them stay out forever. That's for sure. Well, I want to get in a little bit to the logistics of what's going to happen, Bob, because, I thought there was some interesting elements to the day-by-day setup that these players are going to face. And a couple of things struck me. Number one, if you leave the bubble for medical reasons, maybe your wife's having a child, I don't know who's pregnant, but I'm sure a child could be born during the postseason here. An illness in the family, you've got your own medical issue. If you leave the bubble, when you come back, you need 4 days of negative tests before you could come back. Not 10, not 14, not 5, but 4. Now, that's an interesting number. Now, I think that sort of feeds into more, like, we know that the incubation period goes to 14 days, but for those of us who have been following Dr. Sanjay Gupta on CNN or Anthony Fauci, we know that most of these cases within 5 days, if you see somebody who has it, you're going to kind of come down with symptoms or you're going to test positive. So I'm sure they're sort of approaching the practical aspect of this, more so. So it won't be, as a lot of people are speculating, that it would be 10 or 14 if you just leave and there's no reason. Now, it'll be different if you test positive, obviously. But if you just leave and then come back, only 4 days will you have to have a negative test. So I find that interesting. And the second thing is when you do the math on these tests, and we have 24 teams, and there's going to be 31 players, and counting staff. Now, staff includes trainers, equipment people, team physician, masseuses, general managers, video coaches, staff, and everything else. Now you're up to 52. So we're going to have 52 people from every team, 24 teams, getting tested every day. So that's more than 1,200 tests per day at a cost to the NHL of between $100 and $120 per test. it's not going to be cheap to run this, this pseudo 5-round tournament that we're going to run.
Yeah, athletes haven't probably had this kind of expensive stuff up their nose since the 80s.
Yeah, I'm not going to go there, but you're probably right.
It's the thing that you talk about, like, what if somebody's wife is pregnant? I mean, you think back to the days of Connie Smythe running the Maple Leafs and telling them that they had to make sure they had their babies in the summer because you don't have a baby during hockey season. Well, these guys thought along those lines. They probably thought, yeah, well, we'll make sure we have the kid in July or August because we won't be playing then. Well, guess what? And now all of a sudden, guys are going to be facing some very difficult decisions, right? I think it was 99 in the playoffs when Steve Yzerman's wife was close to delivering a baby, and they were playing the Avalanche, and Steve was adamant that if the baby was going to be born on the game day, he was missing the game. And Red Wing fans were apoplectic, thinking that they were going to have to maybe go into a playoff game without Yzerman. And yeah, I can, the consternation then when he might miss one game. Well, now, 4 days you could miss. If it kind of happens during the first round, you could miss the whole series.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, no, you could miss game 4 and 5, which could be the whole series. But what's interesting about that is what do we know about Yzerman? Well, we know he's a family guy, and we know that because the reason he left that job in Tampa was he was sick of being away from his family. They were still, in the Detroit area. That's where their lives were, and he just was weary of the commute. And he wanted to be, with his family. He didn't like being apart from it. And, it probably took guys like Yzerman to take the stands as they did to get us out of the dark ages. Because now it's, like you wouldn't dream of not going for your, for the birth of a child. Like that's just part of what we do now. You just report. But back then, it was, people, or players didn't do that. So, that's interesting. Now, I want to get a little bit more into this idea of that we haven't had anybody opt out yet. Now the players who are opting out, they're opting out for family reasons. Now, I know hockey players are big family guys. So why haven't we heard that? Why haven't we heard somebody say, well, my mom is living with me. I've got, we just had a premature baby. We haven't heard any of that. And I know these guys are, are big family guys. I mean, I've been around them for 35 years. So why haven't we heard the same stuff that we're hearing out of the NBA and the MLB players?
I think it goes back to what I said earlier. They're just that community atmosphere that exists in a hockey dressing room. I don't know that it exists in any other sporting dressing room. And I just think nobody wants to be the guy that lets everybody else down. And I just think that, they'll leave, if their wife's going into labor and how about to have a baby, I can see guys leaving. But I can't see a guy saying, yeah, I'm just not going to play.
So, I see what you're suggesting is that they're putting the team above family, and I just can't see this group doing that. I believe in everything you're saying because I've seen it. I've witnessed the team concept, but I mean, when it comes down to it, are you putting your family at risk to play hockey? I mean, that's the question. So, I don't know. Maybe that makes it. Maybe that's unfair because, they're being super careful. They're living in a bubble. Maybe they just believe that the precautions that the NHL and the Players Association have put in is enough to make everybody safe. But it's just hard when you're seeing players from other leagues saying, "Well, my family is just too important to risk," and then here we are in hockey, and we're saying, well, the team is just so important that they can't leave. But I guarantee you, and you and I both know this, that if someone is pregnant, they're going to have a baby. That player will be gone to the birth of the child. So we will see that, for sure.
Maybe it's just the lure of getting a chance to spend the summer in Edmonton.
Yeah. Well, I know for a fact from talking to a couple of agents and a couple of players that they wanted this, the later the better for players. Players didn't necessarily want to start even as early as August 1st because, it's unnatural for them to play hockey in August. This is when they're starting to get back into it. They're getting with their buddies. They're skating, getting ready for training camp. So they're like most athletes, they like their routines. So they thought it would be better if we could push the start, and plus you got your cottage time too. So they thought it would have been better if we could have pushed this to September and start then, or late August, something in that nature.
Well, I think I've mentioned it before. Last year, covering that World Junior Summer Showcase in Plymouth, and you had the best junior hockey players from Canada, the U.S., Sweden, and Finland playing in a tournament, and it was their first audition to make that team. It wasn't the last chance they were going to have to impress anybody. It was certainly important hockey they were playing, and yet you talk to the players and they said, as much as they knew they were being assessed, it just didn't feel the same because it was August. It says it doesn't feel like we should be playing hockey right now. So the intensity of the games wasn't at a place where it would be, in October or December. It was different hockey. So you wonder, are these guys going to be able to find that gear in August, or is that, subconsciously, are they going to think they're just playing shitty hockey to keep in shape?
Well, the other element, Bob, is the CBA, which, let's give credit where credit is due. We're seeing the MLB almost imploded because their Players Association and the ownership and the commissioner couldn't get on the same page on, how to do the season until we reached the point where the players raised their hand and said, just tell us what you want us to do, and then we'll get back at this when we do another CBA, which almost sounded to me like a threat, more than a surrender. So you got that, and here we are. Not only was the NHL and the Players Association able to come to an agreement on how to make this work, but they also, while this was going on, worked out an extension of the CBA of 6 years, which takes us to 2026. And within that framework, we have important elements of players being allowed to go back to the Olympics, which they desperately wanted. And who knows? I mean, there are going to be people who say, look, the league created this issue, that it shouldn't be an issue. The players should have been there, and they created this just to have a hammer to use in CBA. I don't buy that because I have followed this too long, and I know that the owners really did not see the value of going to the Olympics, and they felt they weren't treated fairly by the IOC. So I think they really were sincere with regard to they didn't think it was a good deal for the NHL. However, I've always felt that Gary Bettman understood the marketing value of being there. Maybe we can't get our arms around how it helps us in the short run, but in the long run, I think Gary Bettman knows it's good to go where, the television audience is far greater than we can generate from our normal deal. So anyway, now we're going back. But the other element that's important is that we've reached some agreement now on, because, obviously both sides are losing money here, and the players, this is a 50-50 split, so they're going to have to, pay up, as it were. And they hate escrow to begin with, so you can't hammer them with escrow for the next couple of years. So we're going to keep the cap flat at 81 plus until we reach where we were before in terms of revenue. And while that's all going on, over 6 years, the players will be able to pay back what they owe without an exorbitant escrow number hampering that. And to me, this seems like really a fair deal. And I commend, and this is what happens when you have two guys like Bettman and Donald Fear who have been to labor war before. They get all this. They understand what it takes to get a deal done. They know what's important and what isn't important. This isn't their first rodeo. And I think this deal results from the fact that both these guys understand the ins and outs of negotiating.
Yeah, and I also look at this as, is this kind of, hockey's always looking to get a bigger chunk of the mainstream audience. And we've seen during this shutdown, one of the sports that has been able to keep going for the most part is horse racing. And there's been a resurgence in the popularity of horse racing because, basically there was nothing else to watch. So people have started watching horse racing. So when hockey can show that not only can they get this done and get back on the ice, they're going to get back on the ice with their full product, unlike, the NBA or MLB, which is already looking like they're going to be missing some pretty big players who aren't going to be participating. So is this going to be a way where sports fans who are obviously frustrated because they've had nothing to watch, they're going to look at hockey and maybe say, hey, maybe we should give this sport a chance, people that normally wouldn't?
I like that. I like your thinking on that. One final thing, and we're going to give you the last word as soon as I set it up here. One of the things that's also in the agreement of how this is going to work, and it's spelled out really specifically, which I found interesting. And it said both sides, the players and the league, have the right at any time to delay, postpone, cancel, whatever we want to call it, this tournament, if there's conditions in which they feel that the players are unsafe or that the competition is not true. And the integrity of the competition is also a reason. Now, we know what that means. What that means to me is if too many people have the virus and, the 31 players isn't enough to field that. So, that possibility is out there. So my question to you, Bob, the last word here, and we'll wrap this up for today. What do you think the chances are that we're going to get through this and be able to finish and crown a Stanley Cup champion?
I think we will get through it, but I think people are going to have to accept that the team that wins the Stanley Cup might not look like the team you would have expected to be winning the Stanley Cup on that, whether it's the Philadelphia Flyers or the Boston Bruins or the Vegas Golden Knights or Nashville Predators, whoever it is that ends up lifting that cup. A lot of guys on that team by then might not be the guys you'd have expected to be there. You might see a few more Providence Bruins and Boston Bruins by the end of this. But I think as long as the majority of the team is healthy and they can go on, because, let's face it, we've seen Stanley Cups won. We talked about the 92 Penguins that had an entire forward line come up from the minor leagues because they had so many injuries. And we have seen in the past where guys had to be inserted in emergency conditions and teams still managed to win. So, as long as it's not like 10 or 15 skaters, I think they're going to keep going.
Well, you know how social media works. Somewhere we'll read on Twitter later tonight that Bob Duff picked the Providence Bruins to win the Stanley Cup. So on that note, we'll say goodbye. We'll see you again later this week.
All right, everybody have a good day.